Hello and welcome to this video on the transitions in the Vinyasa practice. For today's video, we're going to build on what we've been working on in our Chaturanga video and our upward facing dog video, and look how we can transition these movements from one to the next. For today's class, we're going to bring in one theme that's really common to the Vinyasa practice, which is to root down and lift up. So what we're going to be thinking about is this idea of, as we increase our connection to the floor and build awareness to the support in our pose, we're able to create a sense of lightness and buoyancy in the body in other areas that allow us to really create this smooth and efficient transition. As we go through our class today, because in our Vinyasa poses, what's connected to the ground is often our hands and our feet. So we're going to bring in those areas and the sense of rooting down, and then think about our core as the area of lifting up and allows us to create that really smooth transition. So let's get started. We're going to go through our first transition here from downward dog to plank, and this will just set ourselves up for the rest of our poses as we go through. So I'm going to make my way into downward facing dog. Spread the fingers nice and wide here, rooting down through the palms. Tuck the toes under and lift the hips up and back, just finding a downward dog here. This can be the shape of your pose. Just take a moment to get into the body here. And then in a moment, we're going to start to transition from downward dog into a high plank, top of a push-up, but thinking about different parts of the body. Think about where we can originate this movement. So just try one on your own. Inhale forward to a high plank, and then exhale, downward facing dog. On this next one, I want you to keep everything as it is, but just let go of any core awareness. So if you feel like you're hugging in around the waist, like you might be doing as we transition into our plank, just forget about that for a moment. Allow the belly to be soft, and then see what happens as you inhale forward to your plank. Exhale, downward facing dog. Now for me, that feels a lot looser, and it feels like I don't have the support that I need, especially as I get to my plank pose. I feel like my hands and my feet are really heavy because I'm supporting sort of this hammock of my spine. So we can tell right away it's more efficient if we bring in that cinching around the waist as we transition into our high plank. All right, bring in that cinching around the waist here, back into that neutral downward facing dog. And then on this one, I want you to think about originating the movement from the toes. So from the feet, wherever you're making contact with the floor. So we're still going to cinch in around the waist, but no effort in the arms here as we push the toes forward, bring ourselves into a plank, and then really dig the feet in to lift the hips up and back. Notice how that one feels a little bit different. If you want to try that one more time, you can. And then for this last one here, we'll sort of forget about the feet for a moment and just use the hands. So as I bring myself forward into a plank, I feel like I'm dragging my hands back towards my feet on the mat. And then to get back into downward facing dog, I'm really pressing the handprint into the floor to get myself back into downward dog. Take a moment there, just sit back onto the heels and allow that to sink in. See if you notice a difference when we were primarily using the hands, primarily using the feet. And then we'll do that one more time, but bring all the parts of the body in. So really allowing this to be a full integration here. So from downward facing dog, I'm going to think about my handprint in the floor, think about the balls of the feet and the toes into the floor. And then it feels like my hands are drawing back towards the feet are pressing forward. Core is engaged here to really draw myself into that strong high plank pose. And then take myself back into downward facing dog. Everything working together, feeling a little bit more efficient. And that's what we're going to be thinking about as we bring in some of those more complex transitions in a moment. All right, so from here, now we're going to go into what I think is one of the more complicated transitions, in the Vinyasa, which is the transition from chaturanga to upward facing dog. So we know how to get forward into our high plank, we know how to lower down into our chaturanga, and now we have to think about how we lift up into upward facing dog. And with that one, there's a lot of things happening somewhat at the same time. So there's a few aspects of this transition. I like to go a little bit more slowly in my own body so I can maintain that sense of connection. So we're going to be thinking about the hands on the floor and the transition of our toes being tucked under to the tops of our feet flat on the floor. And that's the one that I like to go a little bit more slowly. And then maintaining this core awareness the entire time and allow that to be the driver of our transition here. So if we come forward into our high plank, we know what our chaturanga transition is here. So we're thinking about the upper arm bone is hugging in towards the socket. We press the floor away, magnetize the arms towards each other, and then shine the chest forward. From here, we're gonna lower halfway down into our chaturanga. And then this is where I think about pressing back up almost into a high plank, but I bring that core awareness of upward dog in to bring the chest forward instead. So I'll show you what that looks like. So from here, my chaturanga, come halfway forward, and then from here, press myself up into that chest forward position, and at the same time I flip one foot over, so the top of the foot is now on the floor, and then I slowly bring the other one down, maintaining that connection the whole time. And then from here, press into the hands and the tops of the feet, keep that core awareness, press down, press down, press down, hips are lifting up, and then at the highest point of my hips I roll over the toes, coming back into downward facing dog. Let's take a moment just to break down that transition into downward facing dog from upward facing dog. So what's happening is we're basically flipping our pose from being open to being closed into that downward facing dog shape. And a common transition with the feet is to roll over the toes. And this is optional. You can, the feet are tops of the feet are down, you can just choose to walk them back so the toes are tucked under. But for the smoothness of the transition, some people roll over the toes. So that one's optional. If you're scared to roll over the toes, don't worry, you're not gonna hurt your toes by doing it unless it feels painful. But if you're newer to trying that out, you can start to bring it into some of your other poses. So from a tabletop with the tops of the feet down, you can really think about pressing the feet down and even trying to lift the knees off the floor to really start to build strength. And you can also think about this in a lunge. So with one foot step forward, the other top of the foot is down, and you can even try a few times, see if you can lift the knee up. So those are just some practices if you're newer to rolling over the toes. But I'll show that a couple more times just so you can see it and even practice along. So from upward facing dog, my hand prints are in the floor, tops of the feet are in the floor as well, and that's my support here that allows me to lift the chest while keeping core awareness. So from here, press into the hands and the tops of the feet, nice and strong here, and that allows me to lift the hips up. Keep lifting, keep lifting. When the hips are at their high point, we roll over the toes and walk the feet so they're in downward facing dog. If you wanted to try that without rolling over the toes, we'll try that. Pressing up into upward facing dog. And then same rules apply here. So we press into the hands and the tops of the feet, lift the hips up. And then when it feels like there's too much weight on the feet, just uncurl the toes and press the ball of the foot into the floor. All right, so I hope these transitions are making a little bit more sense for you. From here, let's go through one full round of Sun A. So I'm gonna complete some of the other transitions that are important for Sun A. We'll just start in downward facing dog. So we're acting right now like we're finishing off a sun A. So what we need to do next is step the feet forward. So you can do this by lifting a leg or keeping the foot on the floor. I'll lift the other foot. So you can do this from lifting one leg up in the air. And then as we come forward, I hug the knee in towards the chest and I press the hands into the floor and these back toes, and the core is engaged to lift the hips up, and that gives me a lot of space here. So I'm pressing the floor away to create more space for the leg to step forward. And then from here, all I have to do is step the other foot. And then I like to keep my feet about hip distance apart here and bend the knees as much as you like here. So we can often just rest the belly on the thighs as we come forward and drop the head down. From here, we have our halfway lift. So hands will come towards the shins, and then we straighten the legs and the spine. And what I like to think about here is as I bring the crown of the head forward, my shins are actually pressing into the hands. So full body pose here. And then exhale, release. For a little bit less effort for our spine here, as we stand back up, you can take the hands onto the hips and really crown down into the feet, keeping the bend in the knees to press yourself up to standing. And then hands by the sides, we're in Tadasana. Let's see if we can link that all together. Inhale, arms rise. Exhale, palms touch. Soften the hands through heart center. Soft bend in the knees as you fold forward. Let the head go. Inhale, come into that halfway lift. Hands towards the shins. Crown of the head forward, hips back. Exhale, fold. Plant the hands. Walk one foot back and then the other. Come into a high plank. From here, chaturanga cues. Arms in, press the floor away, magnetize the arms in towards each other, shine the chest forward, scoot forward on the toes. Exhale, bend the elbows, lower halfway down. From here, think about reversing the push-up. Bring one foot over and then the other, chest forward. From here, press the hands and the tops of the feet down. Lift the hips up and back. Find downward facing dog. Take a breath in. Exhale, let it go. From here, let's inhale, lift the right leg up. Exhale, rock forward, high plank, knee in towards the chest. Step the right foot behind the right hand, left foot behind the left hand. Come into your forward fold. Inhale to lift halfway, lengthen. Exhale, release. This time, ground down through the feet. Inhale to rise, lift the arms all the way back up. Exhale, hands towards the heart. All right, so that was our introduction to some of our Vinyasa transitions. So a few reminders as we wrap up here to think about this idea of rooting down and lifting up, paying attention to what parts of the body are making contact with the floor, and how can you use that sense of connection to allow other parts of the body to lift. We also want to think about how the entire body is working together. So that kind of ties into everything. So as you're in one of these transitions, see if you can notice if one part of the body feels like it's working a lot harder than everything else, and see if you can distribute the weight a little bit more evenly. Like all of our repetitive movements, it does take a little bit of time to integrate into our muscle memory, but the more awareness we can bring in and the more practice we have, the more readily we'll be able to find ease in these transitions. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you again soon.